In the U.S., birth control movement developed during the 19th and early 20th centuries, foreshadowing the modern debate over women's body rights. Simultaneously, the criminalization of abortion gained momentum in the late 1860s through the efforts of concerned legislators, doctors, and the American Medical Association. In 1873, Anthony Comstock created the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice, an institution dedicated to supervising the morality of the public. Later that year, Congress passed the Comstock Act, which prohibited any methods of production or publication of information pertaining to the procurement of abortion, the prevention of conception, and venereal disease. During the 1800s, statutes outlawing abortion appeared in 30 states, and statutes preventing abortion with exceptions appeared in 16 states, leaving 4 states that made abortion legal upon request. By 1900, abortion was a felony in every state. Some states did include provisions allowing for abortion in limited circumstances, generally to protect the woman's life or to terminate pregnancies arising from rape or incest. 17% of pregnancy-related deaths were caused by unsafe abortions using coat hangers, knitting needles, or other sharp objects to puncture the amniotic sac within the womb. Often, fatal infections would result. These procedures would happen under the care of back-alley butchers, criminal abortionists, or physicians of conscience. After the legalization of abortion, deaths due to improper abortions decreased to 3%. Abortions continued to occur, however, and increasingly became readily available. The American Birth Control League, later to be dubbed Planned Parenthood, was founded by Margaret Sanger in 1921 to develop birth control clinics and educate women about their bodies. Provisions on abortions continued in the United States, that is, until the court case of Roe v. Wade legalized abortion in all 50 states. How did this day change American history? How do culture and politics play into the issues surrounding Roe v. Wade? How has the American healthcare system been impacted by the case over the last 4 decades? Is Roe v. Wade still important to young Americans today? Let's take a look as we display this exclusive footage from the case on December 13th, 1971 in Texas. Stop picking your nose! Ben, we told you not to do that! I definitely should have shaved my back this morning.
Depicted to the left, Norma McCorvey, a single 20-year-old woman from Dallas, Texas, became pregnant with her 3rd child and feared she would be unable to support the new addition to her family. She hoped to legally seek out an abortion, but due to the strict abortion laws in Texas, she was unable to obtain an abortion. Eventually, she was referred to attorneys Linda Coffey and Sarah Weddington, who later argued her case. Under the alias Jane Roe, McCorvey and her legal team overturned the Texas statute that criminalized elective abortions in Texas and later legalized abortion throughout the U.S. Shown in the center is Chief Justice Warren E. Burger, who led one of the most conservative Supreme Courts in U.S. history. To the left is Texas District Attorney Henry Wade, who advocated for the restrictive laws against abortion.
Order! Order in the court! J. Floyd, Henry Wayne's attorney, deliver your argument.
I enforce the Texas statute that prohibits abortion except for when the mother's baby is in danger. Sarah Weddington, Norma McCorvey's attorney, deliver your argument. The court declared the Texas abortion law to be unconstitutional for 2 reasons. First, the law was impermissibly vague. Second, the law violated a woman's right to privacy in making a decision concerning her reproductive health. After the case was appealed to the Supreme Court, it was debated amongst the 9 Supreme Court justices for the following 2 years. On January 22, 1973, the Supreme Court, with Associate Justice Harry Blackmun and his associates, declared that abortion was to be legal during the first trimester of pregnancy. The court found that a woman's right to choose was a right to privacy and thus protected by the 14th Amendment. The court also ruled that states had the right to regulate a woman's access to abortion once it was determined that the fetus could live outside of the womb.
This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions. The majority in cases from Texas and Georgia said that the decision to end a pregnancy during the first 3 months belongs to the woman and her doctor, not the government. Thus, the anti-abortion laws of 46 states were rendered unconstitutional.
Despite its legalization, abortion continues to be a highly contested issue culturally and politically. The case was a reflection of a cultural shift in America. Roe v. Wade occurred in the midst of a cultural, political, and sexual revolution when women's rights were a pressing issue and when sexual topics were more public.
In contrast, a more conservative America was emerging that identified with traditional beliefs. As a result of the increased discussion concerning abortion, two main groups emerged: pro-choice, who supported abortion, and anti-abortion, aka pro-life. At the time of the Roe v. Wade ruling, pro-choice was mostly made up of single feminist women. Organizations such as the National Abortion and Reproductive Rights Action League and Planned Parenthood helped solidify the views of pro-choice proponents as they focused on women's health and women's rights issues. Abortion catalyzed the national discussion about sexuality and reproductive health that was an elusive subject before. Some could see the decriminalization of abortion as a liberating source.
I see Roe v. Wade as being kind of, I see it as being one of several cases that occurred during about a 5 or 10 year period of time that really were instrumental in allowing women to have control over their reproductive lives, and because of that, to also be able to do advanced schooling in ways that they hadn't previously always been able to do, to enter the workforce in ways that they hadn't previously been able to do, and really to plan their families in a way that hadn't been open to them. Roe v. Wade really allowed for reproductive freedom, and without reproductive freedom, women, I think, have a very difficult time having self-determination. Mm-hmm. So for me, it is one of the most instrumental promoters of women's rights that has occurred in this country. Mm-hmm. And that collection of cases, second only maybe to the vote, and maybe equal to the vote in terms of women being able to be fully participatory in society.
Before 1973, if a woman had become pregnant, her future life decisions were more limited compared to those of her childless counterparts. Roe v. Wade created a second option. Women now had the ability to plan their lives more effectively. Today, many young women and men have a strong stance on abortion.
I strongly believe that abortion should be legal. I believe that it is a woman's right to choose and not someone else's right to tell a woman what she should choose, because that is our privacy and like personal body boundaries. That's your right to claim your own body, and so you should be able to do whatever you want with it, just like getting a tattoo, like getting a piercing, like getting an abortion. That is not the issue of someone whose child it does not belong to.
I think that it's a right of privacy. It's the right to personal control over one's body, and I think that it's not the place of politicians to use a interpretation of a religious text to dictate how people live their lives.
I think that's a choice that women should be able to make.
Why?
I do understand the thought of, you are technically killing a person. I do think that is true, but at the same time, it's true that if they can't care for the child, and that really it is and should be up to their discretion. I think, in my opinion, there should be one just final law. Abortion is legal, and I think the government should probably stay out of it. It's really more of a societal issue than something that necessarily needs funding and regulations, and obviously some regulations, but to the extent that doctors need to know what they're doing.
Yes, I am pro-abortion.
Me too. I think that everyone should have the right to abortion.
How come? Because so the counter argument is that life is an important thing, and you need to not screw with what the Lord basically has created. But on the other hand, life is a thing that we have to deal with. Like the humans ourselves, we have to deal with the fact that we are alive, and to bring someone into an environment that is terrible and where you're not cared for, as in the case of someone who would be, this is right on sentence, as in the case of someone who would be an unaborted fetus rather than Gosh, okay, you talk.
Okay, no, I agree with you. I think it's just unfair to bring a child into a home where they're unwanted, and I think it's just a woman's right. If they don't want to have a child, they should not have to have a child.
And also just for society, like unwanted children, actually in the world right now, like the places with the highest rising birth rate and highest rate of natural increase are the developing countries where they really can't sustain that population. And in the same way, in the United States, the people who do not have access to birth control and abortion are most likely to be in poverty. And that's something we'd also have to take care of as a society if we did not allow abortion.
That makes sense.
In contrast to the beliefs of pro-choice advocates, the beliefs of anti-abortion supporters are typically characterized as having a more conservative outlook on abortion and view abortion as a serious moral issue.
So, I think the court is made a drastic error, much like the Dred Scott case, where they said the black man was not a person, but it was a chattel. It's something that is not easily resolved except if more and more people decide that this is a bad thing like slavery. So we had the famous movie about the slavery business and all, and they showed the slave being put out and strapped to a tree and beat with whips and all kinds of things. And all of a sudden, people who never had seen slavery or anything about that got the picture, you know. Abortion, I've seen about 100 abortions, I think. And I've seen more than 500 live births, including my 4 children, and all that. So I don't have to describe that to anybody for how I feel about it. So when you see an abortion, people are repulsed by that. But I can't show pictures when I give talks on the abortion issue of cut up fetuses and buckets and all, because it's dehumanizing to me. You know, I can't do it. I may scare you enough that you'll never have one, but that has nothing to do with it, because I'm not around to scare you. I wouldn't scare you anyway. And so, but people learn, and we see, and I speak to high school groups all over the country, have a lot of adults, young married families, all the rest. And so people have to live in a society that doesn't say that this is anything but real, and we are responsible for what we do.
For many Americans, their views on abortion are also influenced by their religious affiliation. Many Christian groups, along with other religious groups, do not support abortion. In addition, religion's influence is not only limited to personal beliefs, but it also extends into the American healthcare system.
The recent mergers and affiliations that are happening all over the state of Washington between secular hospitals and Catholic-run hospitals has also created challenges in lots of parts of the state. We aren't necessarily feeling that in Seattle, but lots of other parts of the state of Washington have more limited access to abortion now because places that used to be secular can no longer provide abortion care because of their affiliations with Catholic hospital systems.
Not only has Roe v. Wade changed the course of American culture, it has also influenced the American political sphere on a federal and state level. Since Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court and municipal governments have been faced with multiple cases trying to regulate access to abortion. In 1976, Congress passed the Hyde Amendment, which banned Medicaid coverage of abortion and can be viewed as the first official success in the fight against abortion. Due to the legal flexibility of the Hyde Amendment, it has taken many forms over the last 40 years. During Clinton's presidency, the bill was revised to restrict funding for abortions, except in instances of rape, incest, and life-threatening circumstances that would threaten the mother. States like Washington may choose to allocate funds to support abortions regardless of the cause of pregnancy. However, anti-abortion legislation continues to appear in American politics. For example, former President George W. Bush signed a number of significant pro-life laws, including the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, which classifies a fetus as a human, and therefore it can be a victim of a crime. The federal Born Alive Infants Protection Act, which declares born-alive babies legal persons and protected under the law, and the Partial Birth Abortion Act, which bans a certain type of late-term abortion.
Since 1 in 3 women will have an abortion by the time they are 45, legislature such as this makes it hard for such women to access safe and reliable health care.
Having abortion be legal in our country makes it more accessible to everybody, but it's always been more accessible to people who have financial means. With the more roadblocks that are put up, the more anti-abortion laws that are put into place, like parental notification laws or parental consent laws or waiting periods or mandated ultrasounds, or there are any number of laws recently too that are being enacted to try and limit access to abortion. What that primarily does is limits access for financially disadvantaged women. If you have means, you can always get a safe legal abortion. If you don't, then it makes it very, very difficult. What it doesn't do is substantially reduce the numbers of abortions that happen. It just makes those abortions less safe. We see more attempts at self-abortion. We see teenagers crossing state lines to get to states where there is not a parental consent or notification law, or delaying abortions until they're over 18 so that they can not have to have parental notification, and various other machinations so that they can avoid these roadblocks. But again, sometimes the roadblocks make it totally inaccessible for women.
Abortion has also become an important factor in political elections. Most Americans consider a political candidate's stance on abortion as a determining factor for placing their vote. During the Roe v. Wade debate, Richard Nixon fulfilled the widely held Republican view on abortion. Though he never voiced his opinion on reproductive rights publicly, they were soon known. When the Nixon tapes were revealed, so was his stance on abortion.
I don't think there are times when abortions are necessary. I know that. That's where you have a black and a white.
While Nixon discreetly opposed abortion, the Obama administration has been a dynamic supporter of women's rights and the ability to obtain an abortion.
Women should be able to make their own choices about their bodies and their health care. We reaffirm our steadfast commitment to protecting a woman's access to safe, affordable health care and her right to reproductive freedom. Because we know that we are better off as a nation when women are treated fairly and equally in every aspect of life, whether it's the salary you earn or the health decisions you make.
Most of you won't recognize me or my real name. It's Norma McCorvey.
In 1994, Norma McCorvey published her autobiography titled I Am Roe, in which she described her life as Jane Roe and described her sexuality openly. That same year, she began to advocate against abortion rights. Contradicting her previous 1973 court case, she presented to the Supreme Court in 2005 with the argument that abortion harms women. Her argument was ignored. To this day, Norma McCorvey campaigns against abortion.
I realized that my case, which legalized abortion on demand, was the biggest mistake of my life. You see, abortion has eliminated 50 million innocent babies in the U.S. alone since 1973. Abortion scars an untold number of post-abortive mothers, fathers, and families too. You read about me in history books, but now I'm dedicated to spreading the truth about preserving the dignity of all human life, from natural conception to natural death.
Though Roe v. Wade was decided nearly half a century ago, the controversial decision continues to impact social, political, and even scientific aspects of life. The great debate over abortion does not seem to be resolved just yet.